All right, speaking of cutting costs, let's talk to Kentucky Republican Congressman Thomas Massie. He's got an arm full of freedom and a fist full of liberty dollars, or something like that. By gum, Congressman Massie, welcome back. What did you think of the unveiling of this tax proposal today?
Well, frankly, Kennedy, I like Trump's plan better than the House Republican plan, because the House Republican plan is what they call revenue neutral, which means when you cut somebody's taxes, you're going to raise somebody else's taxes the exact same amount. Whereas Trump's plan for tax reform is not revenue neutral. It actually decreases taxes. And I think it's got a lot of good ideas in it.
Yeah, and I agree with you about revenue neutrality. I think that is a false prophet, and we need to stop worshiping at that altar. And we can talk about cutting spending and cutting taxes, but if you chain them together, it actually makes the whole thing much less effective. Let's talk about some of these taxes. One of the things I like, the idea of repealing the death tax. This is something that libertarians and some conservative Republicans have talked about for a long time. Will this get done?
I think there's a good chance for that. I'm all for it. Of course, Democrats will say that's a tax cut for the rich. I'll tell you one thing I like in there, while we're talking about personal income taxes, is he raises the standard deduction. What that means is people will care less about all these tiny little deductions here and there, because they won't be able to claim them because they already claimed the standard deduction, which is bigger than all that other crap added up. So that's a precursor to simplifying the tax code.
Yeah.
Once people care less about all those little deductions because they've got a big standard deduction, then you can get rid of them.
All right, so I love the idea of cutting taxes and growing the economy. I'm a huge fan of it. I think the government takes way too much money. I think the government spends too much money.
Yes.
And although all of us will be very excited at the thought of paying less in business and income taxes, at the end of the day, we're still paying for a lot of stuff we can't afford. How does this administration and how does Congress reconcile that?
Well, there are some Republicans that say, just trust us, we'll make it up in growth. And I think you will make some of it up in growth.
Sure.
But I think the responsible thing to do is what you're saying, Kennedy, is to cut spending. And there are places we could cut spending. If we roll back the Medicaid expansion that Obama did, I'm not even talking about Obamacare. I'm talking about the biggest increase in a welfare state that we've ever seen. If we roll back that Medicaid expansion, without putting in our own version of Obamacare, we can save $800 billion. And you can use that for tax cuts that stimulate the economy without increasing the deficit. Instead of talking about revenue neutral, we should talk about deficit neutral.
That's a really good point, and it's an important distinction, and I wish more of your colleagues, particularly on the Republican side, would discuss that. Now, of course, there are plenty of people on the left who are going to attack this plan. Do you think having the child care tax credit, which is really subsidies, and the infrastructure spending tied in with the president's plan, does that lure Democrats, and at the same time, does it make you nervous?
Well, at what cost does it lure the Democrats? Because you're right, it's spending in the tax code, okay? It's basically a new social program that will be paid for through the tax code, and it's very dangerous to do that. I haven't seen any plans for his infrastructure inside of the framework that they put forward for this tax plan. But it is troubling. I hope we do cut costs somewhere, cut spending somewhere. Kennedy, let me give you an example of something that I've been screaming about here in Congress. We've spent $100 billion, that's with a B, in Afghanistan rebuilding their infrastructure. And we're on schedule to spend another $10 billion in Afghanistan. Yeah. I pleaded to Mick Mulvaney last night, the OMB director, to go take that money out of the spending, because it's hard to vilify Republicans or Democrats that want to take out money that's being spent overseas. Let's use that overseas infrastructure spending to pay for our own infrastructure spending.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Democrats talk about the moral obligations we have to people in this country, but I think they'd be hard-pressed to say that we need to make that kind of investment in places where we have actively been fighting wars, you know, particularly in the Middle East. I'm going to talk with Rob O'Neill, the man who killed Osama bin Laden, a little later on the show, and talk about the difference between military solutions and political solutions in places like Afghanistan. But I think, you know, you're absolutely right. Spending $10 billion here or there to make those countries better, it's sort of antithetical to what the message was that the president ran on.
Well, the message the president ran on was put America first. And this would be a really good down payment on putting America first if we take the Afghan infrastructure spending and bring it back to the United States and spend it over here. By the way, Senator Rand Paul's idea made it into Trump's plan, which is to lower the repatriation tax and allow $2 trillion of money to flow back into the country, and then take, I don't know that Trump's plan designates that for transportation, but Senator Paul has a great idea for taking that repatriation tax money that will increase and put that toward our transportation. So there's ways to pay for this. We just got to do the responsible thing and take some tough votes.
Well, as long as the repatriation isn't by force, number one. And I also like the fact that the border adjustment tax is not in there, because that affects lower and middle income earners and consumers who are going to have to pay more for groceries and stuff. That's unfair, that's un-American, and it's unacceptable. Congressman Massie, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it.